Clint Romesha was a 26-year-old staff sergeant. His outpost sat at the bottom of a valley, surrounded by mountains on three sides. 300 Taliban fighters were about to attack from every direction. In the next 12 hours, Romesha would lead a counterattack that military analysts still call tactically impossible. October 3rd, 2009, Kamdesh District, Nuristan Province, northeastern Afghanistan. Combat Outpost Keating occupied the worst possible terrain for defense. The outpost sat in a narrow valley at the confluence of two rivers. Mountains rose 1,200 feet on three sides. Enemy fighters could fire down into the base from positions that overlooked every building, every vehicle, every movement. The outpost was scheduled for closure. Too vulnerable, too isolated. But 53 American soldiers still lived there, manning positions while waiting for the order to withdraw. Romesha was a section leader with Bravo Troop, 3rd Squadron, 61st Cavalry Regiment. He commanded a team of 11 soldiers. The base measured roughly 300 meters across. Mortar pit on the north side. Vehicle maintenance area on the south. Living quarters, command post, and aid station clustered in the center. HESCO barriers and sandbag walls provided some protection, but the mountains gave the Taliban every advantage. Intelligence reported increased enemy activity in the surrounding villages. Radio intercepts suggested something was coming. The soldiers reinforced fighting positions and checked ammunition supplies. Nobody knew when. They knew it would be soon. At 5:58 in the morning, the attack began. Rocket-propelled grenades struck the mortar pit. Machine gun fire raked the northern perimeter from positions 600 meters up the mountainside. Then the southern positions opened fire. Then the east. Within 90 seconds, the outpost was taking fire from three directions simultaneously. Romesha was in the barracks when the first RPG hit. He grabbed his M4 carbine and ran to his fighting position near the southern perimeter. Enemy fire was hitting the HESCO barriers, the buildings, the vehicles. Rounds were snapping overhead at a rate that made movement across open ground nearly suicidal. The Taliban had positioned at least 6 machine gun teams on the high ground. Effective range for a PKM machine gun is 1,000 meters. Every position in the outpost was well within that range. The enemy had clear lines of fire to almost every defensive position. Standard doctrine says you attack from high ground and defend from high ground. The Americans were defending from the bottom of a bowl. Romesha reached his position and assessed the situation. The volume of fire was beyond anything he had experienced in 3 previous deployments, hundreds of rounds per minute hitting the base. The sound was constant, overlapping, deafening. This was not a probe. This was an assault designed to overrun the outpost. The Taliban tactics became clear within the first 10 minutes. Suppress the American positions with machine gun fire from the mountains. Then advance infantry fighters down the slopes and through the river valley to breach the perimeter. The plan was working. American soldiers were pinned down. Return fire was sporadic. The enemy was closing the distance. At approximately 6:15, Taliban fighters breached the southern perimeter wire. They were inside the base. Romesha could see them moving between buildings, firing at American positions from inside the compound. The tactical situation had shifted from defense to close-quarters combat. The command post radioed all positions. Enemy inside the wire. Northern perimeter breached. Mortar pit possibly overrun. Communications were breaking down. Smoke from burning vehicles obscured visibility. The aid station reported multiple casualties. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Romesha made a decision without waiting for orders. If the Taliban controlled the southern perimeter, they could move north and roll up the entire base position by position. The American forces would be defeated in detail, isolated and destroyed separately. The only option was counterattack. Take back the southern perimeter, re-establish the defensive line, give the base a chance to organize. He gathered his team, 11 soldiers. He explained the plan in 3 sentences. We advance to the southern positions. We kill every enemy fighter we encounter. We take back that ground. Nobody questioned the order. They knew what needed to happen. The team moved out at 6:23. Romesha led. The distance from their position to the southern perimeter was approximately 100 meters. They would be moving through open ground under direct observation from enemy positions on the high ground. Machine gun teams on the mountains would see them. The Taliban fighters inside the wire would see them. Every meter of movement would draw fire. Romesha advanced. His team followed in a staggered column. At 40 meters, machine gun fire began impacting around them. Rounds hitting the dirt, rounds snapping past. Romesha did not take cover. He continued forward, firing at enemy positions as he moved. His team matched his pace. At 70 meters, RPG rounds began landing near the formation. The enemy had identified the counterattack and concentrated fire on Romesha's element. He adjusted the route using a burning Humvee as partial cover. The team reached the vehicle. Romesha directed suppressive fire at the nearest enemy position, then continued the advance. They covered the final 30 meters under direct machine gun fire from 3 separate enemy positions. Romesha was firing his M4 in controlled bursts, engaging targets as they appeared. 2 Taliban fighters emerged from behind a building at 20 meters. Romesha dropped both with aimed shots to the chest. His team moved past the bodies and reached the southern fighting positions. The positions were damaged but defensible. Romesha established his team in a line and began directing fire at enemy fighters still inside the wire. He called for additional soldiers to reinforce the position. The counterattack had succeeded. The southern perimeter was back under American control. The Taliban advance had been stopped, but the fighting was not finished. Enemy fire from the mountains continued. Taliban fighters were still operating inside other parts of the base. The mortar pit had been overrun. The Americans needed to retake every lost position to survive. At approximately 0730, Romesha was struck by shrapnel from an RPG explosion. The fragments hit his neck, his shoulder, and his arm. Blood soaked his uniform. The platoon medic moved to treat him. Romesha refused to be evacuated. He remained in position, directing his team's fire while the medic applied bandages. The wound was painful, but not immediately life-threatening. Romesha had been fighting for 90 minutes. He would continue fighting for 9 more hours. At 0800, Romesha led a second counterattack toward the northern perimeter. The enemy had established positions in and around the mortar pit. Retaking that ground was essential. Without the mortar pit, the Americans had no indirect fire capability. The team would have to advance 200 meters under fire to reach the objective. Romesha organized a combined element, his original team plus additional soldiers who had fought their way to his position, approximately 20 soldiers total. He established a base of fire to suppress enemy positions, then led the assault element forward. The advance was measured in meters. Move forward 10 meters, take cover, suppress enemy fire, move forward again. RPG rounds were landing close enough to throw dirt on the advancing soldiers. Machine gun fire from the mountains was constant. Taliban fighters inside the wire were firing from multiple positions. Romesha identified an enemy machine gun position in a building near the mortar pit. The gun was suppressing the American advance, making further movement impossible. Romesha exposed himself to enemy fire, moved to a position with clear line of sight, and engaged the machine gun team with rifle fire. He killed 2 enemy fighters. The machine gun went silent. His team advanced. They reached the mortar pit at 0915, 3 hours into the battle. The position was littered with expended brass casings, blood, and destroyed equipment. Taliban fighters had occupied it briefly before, withdrawing under American fire. Romesha secured the position and established a defensive perimeter. Now the base had 2 secure positions, north and south. But American soldiers were still scattered across the outpost, isolated in small groups, some wounded, some running low on ammunition. Romesha began coordinating movement between positions, directing soldiers to consolidate, organizing ammunition resupply, calling for medical evacuation of the wounded. At approximately 1000 hours, the command post ordered recovery of fallen American soldiers. 8 soldiers had been killed in the first hours of fighting. Their bodies were in exposed positions, some in areas still under enemy observation. Standard military doctrine requires recovery of fallen personnel whenever tactically feasible. Romesha volunteered to lead the recovery mission. The first body was near the dining facility, approximately 75 meters from Romesha's position. Enemy snipers on the mountains had clear fields of fire to that location. Any movement would draw immediate fire. Romesha and 2 soldiers moved out under covering fire from their team. They advanced by short bounds. 10 meters. Take cover. Suppress enemy fire. 10 more meters. The Taliban snipers fired repeatedly at the recovery team. Rounds impacted within meters of their position. Romesha reached the fallen soldier, a specialist from another platoon. He and the other soldiers carried the body back to cover. 1 recovered. 7 more to go. The recovery missions continued through the afternoon. Each mission required movement under fire. Each mission required exposing themselves to enemy observation. Each mission brought sniper fire, machine gun fire, RPG fire. Romesha led or participated in the recovery of multiple fallen soldiers. By 1400 hours, all 8 American dead had been recovered from exposed positions and moved to the aid station. The fighting continued until approximately 1700 hours, nearly 12 hours of continuous combat. Apache helicopters arrived and engaged enemy positions on the mountains with rockets and cannon fire. F-15 strike aircraft dropped guided bombs on Taliban concentrations. The combination of American ground fire and air support finally broke the enemy attack. By dusk, the Taliban fighters had withdrawn from the valley. The outpost was secured. The casualty count was severe. 8 Americans killed in action. 27 wounded in action. Taliban losses were estimated at between 150 and 200 fighters killed. Military analysts later assessed that without the immediate counterattacks led by Romesha, the outpost would have been overrun within the first 2 hours of fighting. His decision to attack rather than defend, his willingness to expose himself to enemy fire repeatedly, and his leadership under sustained combat prevented the destruction of the entire garrison. Romesha refused medical evacuation until all wounded soldiers had been treated and evacuated. He remained at the outpost coordinating security and recovery operations until relieved by reinforcements the following day. He had been awake and fighting for more than 30 hours. The recommendation for the Medal of Honor was submitted by his commanding officer on October 15, 2009. The citation was supported by sworn statements from 17 eyewitnesses, radio, transcripts, helmet camera footage, and after-action reports from every officer present during the battle. President Barack Obama presented the Medal of Honor to Staff Sergeant Clint Romesha on February 11, 2013, at the White House. Romesha was the 4th living recipient from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The citation reads, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, Staff Sergeant Clinton L. Romesha distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty while serving as a section leader with Bravo Troop, 3rd Squadron, 61st Cavalry Regiment, 4th Brigade Combat Team, 4th Infantry Division during combat operations in Kamdesh District, Nuristan Province, Afghanistan, on October 3, 2009. His actions throughout the day-long battle were critical in preventing the complete overrun of Combat Outpost Keating. Romesha was born August 17, 1981, in Lake City, California. He came from a family with strong military tradition. His grandfather served in the Army during World War II. 3 of his brothers served in the military. Romesha enlisted in the Army in September 1999 at age 18. He served multiple deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. By 2009, he had more than a decade of combat experience. The skills he demonstrated at Kamdesh, the tactical decisions, the leadership under fire, the refusal to quit, all came from years of training and combat. He was not an untested soldier. He was a professional who understood infantry combat at the highest level. After receiving the Medal of Honor, Romesha retired from active duty. He works as an advocate for veterans and speaks publicly about the battle and the soldiers who fought alongside him. He has repeatedly stated that the medal represents the actions of every soldier at Keating that day, not just his own. Combat Outpost Keating was permanently closed on October 6, 2009, 3 days after the battle. The base was dismantled and all personnel withdrawn. The location was too dangerous to defend long-term. The October 3rd attack proved what military planners had already concluded. Some positions cannot be held. The 8 soldiers killed at Keating are buried at Arlington National Cemetery and other locations chosen by their families. Their names are Specialist Stephen Mace, Staff Sergeant Vernon Martin, Sergeant Joshua Kirk, Sergeant Justin Gallegos, Sergeant Christopher Griffin, Specialist Michael Scusa, Private First Class Kevin Thompson, and Sergeant Joshua Hart. Romesha keeps their names with him. In every speech, every interview, every public appearance, he mentions them. The medal hangs around his neck. Their memory drives everything he does. The citation is 142 words. The battle lasted 12 hours. Neither captures what it means to stand at the bottom of a valley, surrounded by 300 enemy fighters, and decide to attack instead of hide. That decision, made in the first minutes of combat, saved 53 American lives. If these stories matter to you, subscribe to the channel. There are more than 3,500 Medal of Honor recipients. Everyone has a story like this.